Hello, School Transportation Nation. It's Tony Corp, and we're glad you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and by School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications. In just a little bit, we'll be talking with Monique Jackson, an area manager for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in North Carolina. We saw them recently there at STN Expo East. Really great stuff. And Monique wrote a children's book called Gus, the Talking Safety Bus. So really excited to talk to Monique. I know I was talking with you, Ryan, a little bit about Monique and how impressive of a woman she was, and really great to have her on the podcast with us.
Absolutely. I was unable to go to STN Expo, and Ruth Ashmore found Monique actually talking to Scott Welly, our keynote speaker, after his address, and was sharing her book. And so she just happened to see this and was like, "Hey, how you doing? What's your name?" And we got her on. She was featured on one of our videos that we did. We did a bunch of social media videos, and so spoke with her and have a very interesting conversation. She's got quite a career in children and families, a little bit of Head Start flavor there. I've been in transportation for about 7 years now. She's really, there's 14 areas at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. They're almost like mini school districts. I think she has 60 routes that she's responsible for. So that's more than a lot of individual school districts are operating. So we're going to talk about her book, talk about how she got into the industry and more. So stay tuned for that. Really fun conversation.
Yeah, I was just catching up with Nicole Porti, the associate superintendent there. We saw her out at STN Expo East as well. She said she was rallying her team to get them signed up for STN Expo West out in Reno. So I love hearing that. And she was visiting with some different friends in the department and how much they enjoyed the conference. And I said, well, you're going to get a completely different experience in Reno than you will in Charlotte. So I'm glad they're going to be able to go to both. That's really cool. So really great to have Charlotte-Mecklenburg. And then, guess what? It's like a full circle. Dr. Crystal Hill, the superintendent at Charlotte-Mecklenburg, was on the front cover of our magazine. I know we featured them, a great opportunity to kind of highlight one of the largest school districts in North Carolina and all the great things she's doing, as well as the exponential growth that's coming to Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Nicole had revealed to us on stage at the keynote that they got a $2.5 billion with a B dollar bond to build like 30 plus more schools, and they've got to build out the transportation team, equipment, everything to go along with that. That is a big task, Ryan. I'm not sure what the time horizon is to deploy all that capital, but that is a big number.
Like I mentioned, they already have 14 areas. What is it going to go to 28? I don't know. It just some massive growth out there. Certainly looking to peel back the layers on that and talk more about that. Maybe in Reno. Stay tuned. I know the agenda is coming together well. You're just under 3 months away. So got lots of good stuff in store out there at STN Expo West.
Yeah, you guys go to stnexpo.com/west. It's July 11th through the 16th. You can lock in our early bird rate. We also have a super duper, Ryan, I think that's how it goes. Earth Day special. Yeah, you guys get $100 off your registration. You got to look out for STN's secret Earth Day code, which is Green Bus. Lock in $100 off with Green Bus. You can stack that on top of the early bird special. So a 2-for-1, Ryan. That's saving some green while going green, right?
Absolutely. I love it, especially with all the prices around green and everything else going up. So that I'm sure the bean counters will appreciate that additional discount when they're going through invoices very shortly.
Yeah, that's a limited time offer, guys. It'll last a couple of weeks, but lock it in ASAP if you want to take advantage of the discount. So we'd love to see you out in Reno this summer. Really good stuff. Well, before we get to some headlines with Ryan, we got a quick message. Hey, Safety is a number one priority for everyone in school transportation, and even more so when needing to communicate in a school bus setting. School radios, push to talk over cellular or POC radios, are the safety enhancement you need to provide clear communication across all aspects of your fleet. Schools, SROs, that's school resource officers, and beyond. School radio helps take safety and connectivity a step further by offering interoperability solutions that bridge conventional two-way radios with POC systems, creating a unified network that boosts effectiveness and safety. This integrated strategy guarantees smooth communication in both emergency situations and daily activities. To learn more about how school radio can improve safety in your communication methods, visit school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com. All right, Ryan, hit us with it. Federal Driving Forward Act. What is that?
Well, it's essentially, I think we all know at this point or have heard maybe the term under the hood exemption. We're talking about the CDL skills test. Now, this has been going on for a few years. Coming out of COVID, certainly we saw the increasing school bus driver shortage, the increasing just employment shortage in the student transportation industry in general. And NSTA, the National School Transportation Association, has really been the champion of this under the hood exemption, which essentially they went to FMCSA back in January of 2022 and asked for a waiver, a 3-month waiver. They were eventually awarded by FMCSA to say, hey, this is over and above what school bus drivers need to do, going under the hood, that skills test, and needing to identify all the different engine components and check all the different, elements around and in the engine. A lot of times, when we're looking at the CDL skills test, obviously there's been one skills test. The states have leeway in how they provide those tests or administer those tests. So really, when you're looking at the under the hood exemption from NSTA's perspective, there's been so many components that school bus drivers have had to identify in and around the engine compartment that it makes perhaps more sense for truck drivers, Class A holders to understand these things. But NSTA and their members, private contractors, are saying, no, this is hampering our ability and our efforts to hire more school bus drivers amid this nationwide, shortage, if you will. And so this was a tact that they thought could impact that. And in fact, they say that, this is just a statement they made that having this exemption that FMCSA awarded now several times, there's currently a 2-year waiver. And they say that it's resulted in 1,200 new hires ostensibly that wouldn't have been hired if they had to go through and have this rigmarole of all the different components that they would have to identify. So back to this legislation that is currently in the House and the Senate. This is the Driving Forward Act. It was actually introduced as H.R. 2360 by Representative John Carter of Texas. There's a companion bill in the Senate from his counterpart, Senator John Cornyn from Texas, as well as Democrat Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. So there's a bipartisan effort here, to get this passed, to basically extend this under the hood exemption permanently. Now, it's a very complex issue. There are 13 states that had basically decided to go after this waiver, to go ahead and adopt that waiver. It has been completely voluntary at this point. But some of these states that I've talked to, Texas, New York, Iowa, and several others, it really saying, it's not worth the effort, that they have not seen it impact. So you have the contractors saying it's helping. You have many school districts and states saying it's not. So it's very interesting when you get into it. You can go over to stonline.com and read more about this. Gets kind of wonky, but there's the element there of a lot of folks in the industry saying, hey, hold on. They look at it as like dumbifying or dumbing down the CDL skills testing process. NSTA says, no, that's not the point. Again, it's to make things easier. And amid all this as well, you got to remember FMCSA a couple years ago and AMVA, they're partners that, write the testing as well as licensing books and whatnot for all the states. They implemented this modernization project. So that is now at play too. And we have states that are doing that. And that's completely voluntary as well, that already looked to ease the testing and to modernize it, to bring it back up into 2025. It was actually passed in late 2022 and rolled out early in 2023. So it's been out there for a couple years right now. A lot of you readers out there, I'm sure you know a lot about this, have seen it. So FMCSA was already looking at trying to make that skills test and the identification easier, where you're just looking at the fluids, basically air leaks, not having to identify all the components. And so NSTA said, well, hold on, that's not quite what we're seeing. So there's a lot going out there with CDL skills testing. One of the many attempts that FMCSA has done to try to address the driver shortage and ease that CDL experience. As we know, hiring folks, especially school bus drivers, there's a lot of aspects. This is separate from the entry-level driver testing. That's looking at more the administrative side of things. But certainly the school bus driver, quote unquote, shortage is not really going away. Now, some folks will even argue with that. They think that, if you have the right culture, the right pay, that's what's necessary. But we know that a lot of folks are still suffering from not enough drivers. So just the latest attempt going on here at the federal level, as well as at the state level, to try to address this.
Yeah, Ryan, I think whenever there are programs like this that come out, it's always diverging opinions, right? What's good for the goose isn't necessarily good for the gander, I guess, right? So, and everybody's unique. Every organization has unique needs. And at the end of the day, really, can we make an impact on this? Now, like you said, if there are voluntary choices that people can make, that's a choice. We're such an industry that, if it's not mandated, most people don't do it. Right. And also this comes back to kind of like minimum standards. We also, the NCST, right? They're going to go through all of the different things that have hit the school transportation industry. I mean, we talked about it, alternative student transportation. Back when NCST was formed, the last meeting, that didn't even exist as a silo. And it's gone absolutely crazy over the last 10 years, like in terms of a growth trajectory. And we as an industry are like totally behind the times in terms of a regulatory thing. And the states are having to make decisions, and it's created this gray area, right? So I think when we look at anything that's going on in the industry, electric buses, another silo, right? Back when NCST had the last meeting. I mean, how long has it been? Has it been 10 years?
Yes, it's been 10 years. I mean, 2015 was the last meeting. And of course, it was canceled because it was supposed to be in May of 2020. And we all knew what was going on at that time. And this goes to, when you're talking about modernization, I mean, you go back to 2010. And certainly in 2015, there was a lot of folks in the industry. Pete Baxter, our friend who was out speaking at STN Expo East, retired state director from the Indiana Department of Education, former NAPT president, NASDP's president. He was been championing for decades now for modernization of the NCST process. He was trying to bring it online, have real-time comments, and here we are in 2025, that still doesn't exist. And so we have that process that is at least 10 years behind the 8 ball, if not more. So folks are scurrying to pick that back up. So we'll be there, and I'll be out there in Des Moines, Iowa in just a few weeks. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, you're right, Tony. So much has changed, and keeping the industry ahead of the curve, I think, has always been a challenge. It's always kind of at the tail end of things. We talk about, for as important as the industry is and the mission to get kids to and from school safely and ready to learn, it's, representing 15% of a school district's budget. Is that appropriate or not? I mean, we always know that the lion's share of the money is going to go to the classroom. We talk about, from a manufacturing standpoint, everything starts with trucking and trickles down, because trucking, that's what's moving commerce. That's what's making the money. And so the technology advances that are going to hit the trucks first, and they're going to be proven millions of miles on the road, and then it's going to trickle down to school buses. Same thing with electrification. I mean, it just over and over again, it's the same story. It comes down to priorities. Unfortunately, in our society, the priorities go to the almighty buck and not the safety of the children. Children are our future, as Whitney saying. But it is what it is. And it's incumbent upon the industry to do everything it can do and have leaders in place to really push these things, to try to revolutionize and try to evolve so that the industry is not left behind. So I think that's always been something that has plagued the industry, really. And like I said, it will be interesting just with NCST alone, how that shakes out and what we see from that. I would love to see, like I was talking about, some kind of new technology writing committee formed. I mean, there have been, but looking at it from a standpoint of not necessarily the technology on the bus, but technology for the industry, AI. I mean, that's huge. And, what's the conversations on that? I mean, again, we'll know more in a couple of weeks, but from what I've seen, I haven't seen AI addressed. That should almost be its own writing committee. So a lot of fish to fry, a lot of competing priorities out there. But again, I think that if we look at what's best for the children, and all of these things that we're seeing right now in commerce and in society and in regulation and in government, how does that impact what we do in student transportation, what you guys do out there in the nation each and every day, and ultimately making decisions, getting out in front of issues, championing issues to the best of your ability, again, for the benefit of the students that you guys are transporting every day.
Yeah, regardless of all the products and doodads and widgets, it's safety, Ryan, right? That's paramount. People are all about safety. That's where they want to focus on. And we're looking to those sorts of things. Are there standardizations or guidance for industry professionals to operate safer, to operate in a way that they can make the moves that they need to make to be sure that their kids, their communities, their parents, everybody feels good about it? And if it's not a requirement, then people aren't going to do it. So this is why NCST is so important, to lay down this consistency within the industry and to have a 10-year gap. And it's a gap. I mean, it's a canyon, right? It's huge.
So much. I mean, COVID alone happened, and changed the ball game, and to their benefit, I think, NCST, but it was a struggle at that. I mean, we've written about how our good friend, Linda Bluth, one of our contributing writers for STN, she's really almost, if you can say, as fully retired as Linda has ever or will ever be. But I spoke with her recently, and I'm going to put her on the spot, but she's probably going to write it. You'll see her in the pages here of STN fairly soon. But a tenured faculty member for TSD, so important to the industry, especially when you're talking about transporting students with disabilities. She had to really fight to get that alternative transportation writing committee going, because you look at the history of the school bus industry and NCST. This is the first time alternative transportation speaking that a non-school bus element has been deliberated. So that's hallmark in and of itself, but it was not easy.
Well, it's recognized too, right? It's recognized. They're recognizing it as a real, like, this is happening, regardless if they want to write about it or not. That's just, kids are getting to school with alternative student transportation.
And they always have been too. That's the thing. It's like they always have been. And granted, now you see this entirely new market that has been developed. But, kids have been taking taxis. They've been taking transit buses. Mom and dad have been driving them. They've been riding bicycles. They've been walking. We don't talk enough about that kind of stuff. And, that's certainly something I've been paying attention to now that we have, a lot more funding, at least from the last administration, for safe rides to school. So that buoyed things a lot, and have seen a lot more action on that front. But these are all elements of transportation. Bill Paul, our co-founder, along with Colette Paul, Bill would always tell me when I started 20 plus years ago, hey, I named this school transportation news for a reason. I didn't name it school bus news. I named it school transportation. And granted, yes, so much of what we talk about is yellow, but there are other elements, there are other ways kids get to school. And how is transportation including itself in those conversations? Is it including themselves in those conversations? They need to be, as the transportation safety experts within that school district, they need to be imparting their wisdom, their experience in anything to do with getting kids to and from. And that's my firm belief, and it's easier said than done. And some folks, and I'm sure a lot of folks, will disagree with me, and that's fine. I've never driven a school bus. I've never routed one. I get it. I write about them. But you got to look at the greater scheme of things, and realize that yes, kids have always been getting to and from school in different modes, not yellow. When at the height, school buses were transporting 45% of all the nation's school kids. It's not that anymore. It's more like maybe 20%. Some of the federal stats I've seen is more like 17%. So the industry realizes, I think, that there are other elements that are getting kids to and from, and we can't just bury our heads in the sand. We can't just forget about them or say, oh, that's not our problem. If anything, if the student transportation is going to live on, it needs to be a part of those conversations. It needs to figure out, how do we help make sure that these modes are as safe as they can be. If maybe they're not going to be as safe as the school buses, okay, well then what can we do from our part to try to help these other aspects become safer? I think that's really what the goal needs to be.
Great thoughts, Ryan. All right, we got a great guest interview coming up with Monique Jackson from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools right after this. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN Expo in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards, voted on by STN Expo attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution, designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN Expo attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com.
All right, School Transportation Nation, we're back and honored to welcome to the podcast stage Monique Jackson. She's the one of the area managers for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. Monique, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So we met Monique at STN Expo East a few weeks ago in Concord, right outside of Charlotte. And we have a children's author, a children's book author here with us. So Monique, we're going to be talking about Gus, the Talking Safety Bus book. It's for children. Obviously, a lot to unpack there and talk about. But first of all, want to know more about you. So you are, as I mentioned, the area manager for CMS, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. How long have you been in student transportation total?
Wow. I've been with student transportation now since 2018. This is my 7th year. working in people transportation here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm one of the 14 area managers for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools district. We have a pretty large district, and we have 14 different areas that provide transportation for our students and families daily.
Yeah, it's second largest school district I know in North Carolina. I'm not sure in terms of transportation operation, but I know you're either one or two. I know Wake County, I think, might beat you. But I did want to ask you about those areas. So 14, that's a lot. Do you know off top of your head how many square miles we're talking about for the entire district? Like where
Wow.
how much you're transporting? Because I'm sure you're probably going out of districts too. So it.
Well, I tell you, it's far and wide. And I mean, we start up, if you think about going up north, like all the way from, I'd say, like the Lake Norman area, all the way down, I mean, oh my gosh, close to the South Carolina border.
Okay.
So we basically cover a lot of square miles every day. I know my one area basically serves about 5,000 students and families.
Okay.
So you think about 1 times 14.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So you now in your area, and as I'm sure the other 13, you have students in general education, students in special education programs, Title I, McKinney-Vento, all that falls under your purview?
All of those fall under our umbrella because, of course, we serve all students unless they are students that basically attend or have an IEP where they have needs that assign them to Metro School, which are really for a lot of our other students that need particular services and needs. But we do have students that we transport that are along with our gen ed students. We call them extension students, where we do have, sometimes it could be a nurse on the bus. It may be a special monitor on the bus to support them. But yes, we serve a huge number of students and families every day. And I'm proud to say that for this particular area, my area is Rocky River, we service 12 schools. So we serve all of the students for 12 different schools, 2 high schools, several elementary schools, and then also some middle schools. And then we have magnet programs. So those are schools where it doesn't matter where you live in the county. If it's a county-wide magnet, guess what? We transport students from all over. And then, of course, from McKinney-Vento, those students, we want to provide that continuity of care. And so those students are still allowed to be transported to their home school.
I'm sure a lot of people in the nation hear that, and your area is the size of some of our readers and our audience's school district, maybe even larger than the school district that they're the director of. So, how many buses do you operate out of your area, and how many drivers and other staff out of your area, the Rocky River?
We actually have 60 buses right now. That we're running because, of course, over and through the year, as things change, we try to, cut back if we can. Currently, we also have on staff about 55 drivers. It's kind of different in the morning as well as in the afternoon because the numbers are not the same because you can have people that are out on FMLA or, for different reasons. But guess what? We can't, of course, take those jobs away. So those are sometimes open routes, and we have to provide that coverage for those buses as well.
So again, times 14, and you get a scope of how big CMS is. And you have a new executive director of transportation, Vec Dunn. So,
yes.
But he's been there for a while. So I'm sure you've probably worked with him for many years.
He has. In fact, it's so funny. Mr. Dunn actually was part of the interview panel when I was interviewed back in 2018.
Okay.
And so he was at that time an operations director who basically became our executive director 7 years later after Adam Johnson transitioned to Atlanta Public Schools.
Exactly. And we know your associate superintendent very well, Nicole Portee. She's a good friend of ours, former STN Transportation Director of the Year. So great family we got over there. And you guys were great co-hosts, I guess we would say, along with Cabarrus County there when we were out in North Carolina a few weeks ago, like I mentioned, for STN Expo East. So what got you involved in student transportation? Because I was reading a little bit about you, and it says, your bio says you have 25 years of working with children and families. So let's talk about that. What were you doing for the previous, 18 years or so in children and families? And then what got you into student transportation specifically?
Well, I'm a native of Boston, Massachusetts. And when I was in Boston, I actually worked with different programs for basically families who have children that are in preschool. I started out, my first 10-year working with children was as a preschool teacher many, many years ago at the Crispus Attucks Children's Center in Boston, one of the largest child care centers in Roxbury, Massachusetts. I started out and I began, working in the field of early care and education, and then kind of transitioned later on, and I became a program director for one of the programs in the city of Boston. And while there, I got connected to a group of people or educators, and it was basically the inner city network of early education professionals. It was a great group of people who were, child care providers. Some of them were center directors, providers of childcare in the home. And later I became the president of this organization and served for 3 years. And we provided a lot of great work, including bills that we were working on to provide quality and affordable childcare for all children. Really a lot of groundbreaking and grassroots organizing. And so I really love children and families. And I think that it's important that all children have access to, a quality education, whether it's for before school, after school, of course, for our daily school routines as well. So I really I've been wearing many hats, I'll say that, over the years. I served also as the person that was in charge of the Dorchester Neighborhood Cluster, which provided opportunities through the Department of Education and funding for parent advocacy, for, continuing education for people that were in the field of education, for training, just even for workforce development. So I've been around for quite some time in terms of the education field, and I've worked in diverse programs that are traditional as well as non-traditional. I actually served as the director of court child care. We had an opportunity when I believe it was Janet Reno that was in office. She was serving at the time, and she actually brought forth the opportunity and had funding for us to do court-based childcare, so that children who were with their parents and their parents had court business, they could be in a therapeutic environment outside of the courtroom and not be privy to all of the different things that were being said in the courtroom. And, sometimes the courtroom is not a safe place. It's lots of different things, but it wasn't a good environment that was conducive for children's growth and development.
Absolutely.
So lots of work. And then when I came to North Carolina in 2004, I actually took a little bit of a break, but then went back into the school district and started doing some after school programming, and eventually started teaching. And so I took the time and actually taught 5 years as well before coming to transportation.
Okay. So it sounds like a little bit of head start in there, after school care, teaching, a lot of advocacy work, probably, getting into the political realm too. You got to, we all play politics in our lives, but certainly with, what you were doing, you mentioned Janet Reno, former U.S. Attorney General. So, okay. So you had this career in education in children and family services. So then you just mentioned, you moved over to transportation. So what lured you over to the school bus world?
Well, and I'll be honest with you. After teaching for 5 years, I did, of course, I had gone back in the process to grad school, and I went through the process of receiving my school administration graduate degree to become a principal. And for a while, I just said, you know what, I really think I want to do something different. And to be, one of my friends said, hey, reach out and apply for this position in transportation. I think you'd be great. And I said, I don't know. I don't know anything about transportation. I mean, of course, we've ridden the buses for trips and coordinated and scheduled trips with transportation, but really didn't know a lot about the transportation side. And so I did, basically throw my hat in the ring, and I was selected and chosen to be the area manager originally for the Hopewell transportation area. And you know what? I've been here ever since.
That's awesome. Well, you got the yellow in your blood, it sounds like.
I do.
Oh, that's great. So let's talk about Gus, because that's what first prompted some of the conversations that our editorial staff, Ruth Ashmore, specifically had with you. We got you on some video, so all you who are catching up with our STN Expo coverage probably saw Monique talking about women leadership, of course, with March being Women's History Month. But with Gus, so where did that idea come from to write a children's book about a school bus?
Wow. Well, I will tell you, it's really interesting. My love for stories and storytelling comes from my kindergarten teachers. They were great storytellers. I loved when it was time for us, when I was a little girl in school many, many years ago. But I loved being able to read and to hear stories. And my mother always read to me. I actually could read before I went to kindergarten.
My daughter too. I did the same thing. Yeah, she could.
It makes a difference, right? Our parents were Head Start for us before Head Start was there.
We are the Head Start. Yeah.
So yes, we are. So, that love for reading and storytelling really captured my attention. And I wrote my first children's book in 2020 during the pandemic. And so it's just been an amazing journey since then. But this particular book, Gus, the Talking Safety Bus, this was written, and these two characters basically are my two little twin granddaughters.
Ava and Livy.
Who actually, right? Yes, Ava and Livy. They're actually 8 now, and they are second graders, but they know about Gus, the Talking Safety Bus, because here in Charlotte, within our department, we actually have a real Gus who is basically a talking safety bus, and he goes around to the different schools and they do bus safety teaching with the students from kindergarten up through, I want to say, first grade. And so this really was an inspiration for me to write about an experience that, of course, not only did my grandchildren have, but many, many of the children in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, because Gus actually talks to them, tells them their name. He'll say hello to them, but he shares the importance of learning about the danger zone and the importance of safety when riding the bus and also when waiting at the bus stop. And we know that, it can be pretty dangerous when you're out there. Some parents, guess what? They're not at the bus stop with children because some parents have to work. So it's important for us to make sure that our children know what is required and how they can be safe while they're waiting at the bus stop, but also when it's time to board the bus and then on that ride to school and again from home, what's necessary to keep them safe. So that's where that comes from.
The least safe place for kids when they're riding the school buses, when they're waiting outside or when they just got off.
That's right.
We write a lot about that. We're always talking about that. Sessions, very important. We had a session about that out at STN Expo East. Curious, what do you do with your area and what does CMS do, transportation department wide, in terms of training for the danger zone? Because it's multi-pronged, right? You have your drivers, You have, if you especially if you have aides on the bus, if it's whether it's you're transporting students with disabilities or not, we're seeing a lot more aides getting on the bus to help the driver, and we can talk a little bit more about the quote unquote driver shortage. That's kind of falling out of favor, that terminology, for good reason. But you're also you hit on, you have to train the students. And you have to get that parent buy-in. You've mentioned a lot of times parents aren't able to get in there. But again, the head start for so many children is their parents, and getting the parents on board so they know what the procedures are, so they can hopefully reinforce those lessons at home.
Absolutely. And I think, and I like what you said, in terms of it being, three-prong or multi-prong, because I mean, in anything that we do for students, and we know that for us, working for the school district, the primary purpose of why we're here is to support student learning and education. And so you're right. I think that this particular book will provide parents and students with an opportunity to have a great conversation, about the importance of safety, learning about that danger zone. But yes, when it comes to training, our drivers are trained to establish those safety rules with students. And for me, as an area manager, I love the fact that, 21 days, the first 21 days, you can reinforce and share those safety rules with students. It takes 21 days to form a habit. And so it's important that I also remind drivers, be consistent. Get to know your students. And I know that may be a challenge because in some cases we're carrying 65 students, especially elementary. We pack those buses, a lot of times. But get to know them, slowly but surely over time. Within the first 90 days, you get to know who your students are. Because a driver, I tell them, besides teachers, they have one of the most difficult jobs in the entire district, is to transport those students. And one of the things I will not forget is during my interview, when Mr. Dunn was interviewing me, one of the things he said, because he knew I was a teacher coming to transportation, he said, the school bus is like a classroom on wheels. And it's true,
Exactly.
So there are opportunities for our drivers, even our monitors, to teach and to model for students what the behavior should be, what safety looks like on the bus, and then to be able to build those relationships with parents as well as our school administrators. Because for each of my 12 schools that we serve, we also have administrators who we contact that deal with transportation. And, this is not something that's new. And so we really try to keep everything within the circle so that if something does happen, we're communicating that information with everybody involved. But it's the same for training. We do a wraparound service to make sure that drivers have the information, the monitors have the information, school contacts know what information that, our drivers and monitors have been trained on. And everybody basically has the opportunity to be on the same page so that we can provide a wonderful transportation experience that's not only efficient, but also safe and beneficial for each child.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, with your staff there in your area, your associates, your coworkers, your drivers, you're running maintenance out of that area, I would imagine, as well. So you have technicians, you have the whole, kit and caboodle. Wonder what's their feedback been on your book? Because obviously that's this industry, you've been doing this for many years now. But that's always maybe the best litmus test, right? Is you have others in transportation read your book. What's the conversations around the coffee pot or the water cooler at your area about your book?
Well, it's interesting because I'll say this. I don't promote my products at work. I really try to kind of keep them, separate. Mr. Dunn and, the leaders, Mr. McAllister is my operations director. They know about the book and definitely are excited about it. And they realize that, it is something that's a tool. And I think that because of who I am and my educational background, the book is a teaching tool and opportunity. So I think for me, when I do go and I read it, because I've actually gone to different schools for like Read Across America Week and Meet the Author events, and people enjoy it. They love it. There's actually an assistant principal here in CMS. Her name is Christine Sims Little. She remembers Gus the Talking Safety Bus. Gus is a rock star. He's been around forever, and he is definitely a staple in transportation, because there are adults, even when Gus goes to different events, here in Charlotte, people remember him. And so the book is just a reminder of not only how great Gus is, but about the impact that has been able to be made in, student safety. Even with this book is coming behind to highlight really a lot of the groundwork that's already been done in safety.
Outstanding. And you had referred to it earlier. I wanted to circle around with it. Your first book, Mommy, Why Is Everyone So Mad? I think that was what you were referring to. You wrote during the pandemic.
It is.
Talk real quickly, where did that idea come from?
Well, I mean, during the pandemic, we were really kind of confined to our homes. In some cases when the virus was really, things were really bad. And we really had a lot of time on our hands. And as you know, there were lots of different things happening, lots of social injustices. And we were seeing a lot of things in the media, that were negative and that impact, children and families. And so that book provides teachable moments for conversation, but also for children to recognize our diversity and how we're beautiful, even in our differences, that those are the things that, stand out to make us a wonderful culture and group of people as a whole and as a nation.
Outstanding. And then I don't know how you get this all done, because you were mentioning when we jumped on you, it was a busy day, and I appreciate again you taking some time. But you're writing children's books. Your day job day calling is being area manager for CMS. You also founded during COVID Kingdom Work. I think I'm saying that right.
Oh, yes. It's actually Kingdom at Work. That was actually
Kingdom at Work. Okay.
That's an online faith platform. And really, it was with a group of, people that came together and wanted to be supportive in their faith to each other and to pray, because during COVID, 10% of my staff, including my director, they lost their mothers. And so it was very, very, difficult. And you know what transportation does when there's a crisis, we transform. And so we weren't transporting students, but instead during that time, we became a force to transport educational, materials as well as devices. And then we turned around and also provided assistance to child nutrition, and we delivered meals on a regular basis.
Absolutely. So you're delivering a lot of meals for the soul, Monique. So I really appreciate you coming on. Tell our audience real quickly, where can they find your books?
My books are available on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. Or on my personal website, which is www.kingdomwrk.com.
Outstanding.
And there in my store, you can shop for all of my latest books, including 2 of the adult books that I've written. I actually just released another book on last Monday.
Oh, wow.
But that's not for children. That's for adults.
Okay. Well, we won't talk about that one. That's well, thank you so much. Again, Gus the Talking Safety Bus is the book, one of the books.
Gus is going to Rome.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't even talk. You're going to Italy soon too. And I mentioned there's an Italian version. Real quickly.
That's exactly right.
Real quick story. How did that come about?
Well, my publisher, who is out of Jamaica, but actually it lives in Italy, she's doing an author's retreat. And so I will be there actually doing a workshop for children there in Italy. And so in order for me to do that, I'm going to actually have someone that will translate, as I do the workshop for the students, but the book has been translated into Italian. You probably can't see that, but the words have been translated into Italian, and I'm super excited about taking Gus to Rome and sharing bus safety with students and families overseas.
Gus Goes to Rome. Maybe that's the next children's book.
Stay tuned.
Aha, see? Yeah, exactly. Well, Monique, very interesting talking to you. Boy, you've got some side hustles. They're really impressive. And I'm so glad that we got to know you at STN Expo East, and I have gotten to know you now. And again, appreciate you coming on, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both. Thanks, STN.
A special thanks to Ryan Gray, Monique coming on, sharing a little about your book. So excited. Gus, the Talking Safety Bus. Gotta love that, guys. Also, we appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder and School Radio. Don't forget to visit stnonline.com for all latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. We got you covered with all the latest and greatest, guys. Also, don't forget STN Expo West out in Reno. Take advantage of our early bird special. Go to stnexpo.com/west. And don't forget to lock in the extra $100 off for Earth Day. Save some green with code GREENBUS. That's all caps, no space, GREENBUS to save $100 off your STN Expo main conference registration. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.